Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very special guest, and of course, we have our co-host, Corinne French.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Can't wait to get started.
Yes, same here. We have Superintendent Edwards from Angleton ISD, the beautiful area of Angleton. If you haven't been down there, it's beautiful country out there. Thank you for being here, Superintendent Edwards.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Outstanding. And so are we. We're looking forward to the conversation. Before we jump into the conversation, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I've been in education. This is my 34th year. I started out as a math teacher. I've worked mainly in the Dallas area. I worked in Edgewood ISD, Mesquite ISD, got into school administration in Kemp ISD, where I was fortunate enough to be the superintendent there for about 3.5 years. And then 4 years ago was very, very fortunate to be chosen as the superintendent and the leader for Angleton ISD. And so I've done that for the last 4 years. So like I said, I was a teacher for 11 years and been in school administration for 20 plus years for that, and have enjoyed every bit of it.
When you were in that classroom, did you ever see yourself as superintendent, and how did that process happen?
So that's a great question. And the answer is no, I never saw myself as superintendent. The story of how I became a superintendent, I really wasn't expecting to be one at that point, but an opportunity was presented to me and I thought, yes. You know, one of the things that I could say, I love teaching. I taught math, high school math for 11 years, just enjoyed the heck out of it. But the truthful of the nature is I had a family to support. My wife, we have 3 kids. My wife chose to quit her job and stay home. And so I had to make more money. And the way you do that in education is you get into administration. And I just gradually made my way up through that. But the economic factors of staying in education and supporting your family is kind of what led me into administration. I tell people all the time, I said, if they paid teachers what they paid superintendents, I'd still be teaching. I like doing that.
Wow.
But, you know, I think that's one of the things that I always try to remind myself when we've tried to do some things here in Angleton about how do we keep people who want to stay in the classroom, give them the ability to stay in the classroom and still financially support their families. And so, you know, if our starting teacher salary here in Angleton is $55,000, which is pretty high. But I think if we gave teachers an opportunity to get into that $90,000, $100,000 range and get there, they might be more willing to stay into the classroom.
Well, I'm working on my doctorate right now. And I mean, those are things that I think of all of the time, because when we're thinking of building capacity within leaders and within a district teacher retention, I mean, those are, wow, you went real deep, real fast. I mean, I know, I love that, because I mean, I wish we could. I wish we really could, because I mean, you think of a teacher. Well, I think of it this way. There are students that I mentor at the university, and I'll ask them, do you ever think that do you ever see yourself as superintendent? And one of the young students that I mentor, she said, well, whenever I'm tired of teaching or I get burnt out. And I was like, you may never burn out. Like you really may never burn out of teaching. It's almost like when I was having kids, someone said to me, when are you going to stop having kids? And I said, well, when I feel like I'm done. I have 6, and I would have had 1 million, you know? And so I don't know if this is the right approach of doing that, but along those lines, what have been some of the comparison, you know, in the classroom, you make an impact with students, and now your impact is larger. What have been some highlights being in leadership this way?
I think one of the things that I've worked in, I've been superintendent in 2 districts that have a low socioeconomic status. And so when I was in Kemp, you know, our low socioeconomic status, 85% of the district was that. In Angleton, it's about a little over 70%. And so one of the things that's been wonderful for me in working in administration is when you see kids come out of poverty and expand and improve their lot in life, you know, make more than what their parents make, have those opportunities to do those things. Inevitably, the reason they get to do those things is because of education. It's being in schools, it's being in public schools, it's working their way up through the education system. And so that to be able to put together as a teacher or as an administrator, putting systems in place to allow those things to happen for kids is probably one of the things that I'm the most proud about that I've been able to do in my time in education. I just think that's very, very important that kids, no matter what their opportunity they're born into, education is that equalizer and provides them the opportunity to improve their state in life. And so that's the things I've enjoyed the most.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, it truly is. I mean, you think about teachers, and we're talking about salary earlier. It's a definitely an underrated value that you get. I mean, if you look at the big picture, and I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we had to write an essay, and it was talking about teacher salaries versus professional athlete salaries. And
Yeah, let's not go there.
it was like, well, should teachers be paid? And it was interesting that it might have even been posted in our yearbook, and it was kind of interesting the answers you get. And there's definitely a level of support that's needed for teachers, both from the community, from society, there, and of course financially as well, because that is a big job to have. Now superintendents, that I don't know how y'all do it, honestly, with so many stakeholders and so many differing opinions, and I mean between the community, the government, the staff,
the board.
the board. I mean, yes, you get paid more, but it's a lot more. Well, I can't say it is challenging. I'm just going to make that statement. It is a challenging role from what I've heard. I've never had the opportunity to experience it. I don't know if I'd want that role because because it is so challenging. Now, what are there's a lot going on right now in society. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about some of the challenges faced. I mean, you have a virus out there, you have technology changes, you have students that are exposed to different things nowadays. You know, just thinking about some of the other podcasts I've done, those topics have come up. What are you seeing right now that you're really passionate about, or something that just, I don't want to say keeps you up at night, but what are some of those things that are, you know, maybe it's one thing in particular that you feel like could make a big difference if there was maybe a change?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think a lot about, well, I'm going to talk about two. I'll first talk off, that's kind of two parts there is how I'll answer that question. I'm going to start off by talking about, you asked me what keeps me up at night. What keeps me up right now is what's going on in our schools and in our classrooms that our teachers and principals are having to deal with in terms of what COVID has put on them, alongside of with what we expect out of them academically. You know, the TEA has got, hey, we've got standards we want you to meet, and we expect you to improve, and we expect academic improvement, and we expect, our board expects, and rightly so, you know, us to keep growing kids and, you know, providing great opportunities for kids. And so we have those pressures that are getting put on teachers. And then we have the virus and COVID and what all that does. And so it's driving people out of our profession. I mean, that's just a reality that we're dealing with. So, you know, what keeps me up at night and what I've been thinking a lot about in the last 6, 8, 12 weeks is how do we keep our people in our district? How do we keep our good teachers teaching? You know, I had a conversation with some of our staff here, and, you know, I said, you know, we want to put programs in because we think it will help kids improve. But I said, let's be very honest. The best thing we need to have happen is our strong teachers need to continue to work at Angleton ISD and not go do something else. That's what's best for kids. And so how do we do that? How do we help take some of those burdens off teachers, but still get the academic improvements we need for our students? And how do we make up that gap in learning that we've experienced from COVID? That's a really tricky situation. I'm going to tell you, I don't have a good answer for it. We are spending a lot of time and a lot of things to try and do to help that. I think the other thing that I'm just extremely passionate about that kind of fits in line with that is equity. You know, I told you we work in a school district right now that's 70% free and reduced lunch. How do we provide equitable programs for all kids? And, you know, one of the things I think, especially in the political world we live in today, is people hear that word equity, they hear minority, or worse, they hear Democrat and Republican. And it's not about these things. It's about how do we give all kids the same opportunities. And so that's probably something I'm very, very passionate about, and try to put systems in place that give students equity, give students opportunities for the same, to reach the same heights, I would say.
Yes. Wow. That hits close to home for me. I'm just gonna be completely transparent here. So I grew up in a single family household up until I was in the 4th grade. And I remember, speaking of equity, free lunches, free breakfasts.
Right.
I remember the day when I got the opportunity to get breakfast in the morning, a warm breakfast in the morning, and a warm lunch.
Right.
My mother was working for the sheriff's department. She was spread thin. I mean, and I remember going from that transition to a little bit of Wheaties with a little bit of milk to an actual meal that I mean, it definitely, it affects how you learn. It affects,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a big deal. And to think about, to have the same expectations of a student that has all their needs provided for versus a student that's looking for table scraps for breakfast or for lunch, it's massive, and it's something I'm passionate about. And so I left the corporate world about a year ago to join a faith-based organization to give back to schools and churches. And so it's interesting to hear these stories because it's something that definitely hits close to home. What are some ideas? First of all, I just want to thank you for shedding a light on this, because it's easy as human beings to, once you get through a pandemic or you get through a tough situation, to try to go back to the way things were. But now we're looking forward, right? We're looking how to change things. And any ideas that have come to mind that could help the situation?
Yeah, I'll just talk about, first of all, a couple of things about things we've done here in Angleton that I think have really helped promote equity and provide opportunities for students. And then what I see some other challenges as we move forward. Just real quickly, one of the things we did a couple of years ago, and I was very proud of our board. I work with a wonderful board here in Angleton, is we made the commitment that we're going to pay all dual credit costs for any student in our school district. So we have a very robust relationship with Brazosport College down here. We have a very robust dual credit program. We want our kids in high school to take dual credit classes because we know research shows that if you can pass a dual credit class in high school, the expectations that you're going to do well in college just increase dramatically. And one of the things we didn't want to do is a parent's economic standing, because dual credit classes aren't cheap. I put three of my kids through them. It's $1,200, $1,500 a semester. And, we didn't want a student's economic background to determine whether they got to do these classes or not. So our district made the commitment that if a kid signs up for a dual credit class through Brazosport College, the school district was going to pay for it. There's going to be no cost to anybody. Doing things, that's an example. Getting our best, most experienced teachers in front of the kids who are the most needy. Making that kind of commitment is a huge thing that can go to equity. Making sure when we look at specialized programs like Gifted and Talented, that we really look at what the background of the student is, because some kids are able, and what's our selection criteria to get kids in Gifted and Talented, because a lot of times it's based on who has better experiences at home and growing up than it is other things. Those are some of the things that we've done. I think one of the biggest challenges we have when it comes to equity is technology. Kids who come from impoverished backgrounds not only need access devices, but they need access to the internet. And this really came out during COVID when we were trying to do home learning, and we just had kids that didn't have access to it. And how did we get those things to them? And it sounds very simple. Oh, give them a Chromebook, give them a hotspot, but it wasn't. I mean, we have places where kids live that hotspots, doesn't matter if you got a hotspot or not, it doesn't work. And so giving kids access to the internet, to technology, and I'm sure y'all know, that's not going to go away. That's only going to increase in our society. And so we've got to give kids opportunities to just get on the internet and have access to these things. And so Those are a lot of the topics we talk about here in Angleton, and I know they are the same topics in almost every school district in the state as well.
Yeah, I mean, that the idea of like when we got sent home, it doesn't matter. You're right. If there was a device, we had to improve our internet 3 times where I live in my district. I live a block from the school.
Wow.
I'm on the board, the service president on the board, but it didn't matter. Like it just wasn't happening fast enough. I don't think I've ever cried so much, like out of fear and being scared, because that and when we had the winter storm, I mean, those were some really difficult times as an adult. So
Right.
you think of like how are our kids handling some of that?
Mhm.
I think I wonder like what as we're moving forward, I don't want us to return back to normal because some things weren't working prior
Right.
to this pandemic, but we know kids do better in the classroom. But I think we need to have you back on and actually like dive deep again into more some of this equity conversation. I think people are afraid to even talk about that, like you mentioned, and we want to throw it into certain categories right away without just saying, where are we with this? What does it look like in our district? So I think we need to have you on again. But I have a question about, you mentioned we kind of talked a little bit about that people are leaving the field.
Right.
So, and we can't pay them the way we want to. Maybe we could do some retention bonuses and some we can make some accommodations. But what do you have to say to the young students at the university level who are thinking, why would I go into this field? Do you have some tips? And then a second maybe piece of advice, or there are a lot of open positions for superintendents in this state right now. And I'm personally in class with some really great principals who are getting their superintendent certification. So I feel very confident that there are going to be plenty of quality candidates out there. But it's a daunting task, it's a little, so just some general tips and advice, maybe a couple sentences there on encouraging those young students, and then also the students who are ascending to be superintendent.
Sure. The thing I would tell young students is this, and I shared this quote with our staff. We were at TASA Midwinter a couple of weeks ago. We heard a gentleman speak by the name of Inky Johnson. He was fantastic. One of the things Mr. Johnson said that really resonated with me, and really, we had an administrative meeting this morning, and I told them the same thing. I said, the comments he made, and he talked about people leaving the profession, and he said people don't leave the profession because of what's happening to them right now. And he was talking about COVID and that kind of stuff. He says people leave the profession because you've forgotten why you're doing this job and how important the job is. And so what I would say to new people getting into the profession is, you're right, you're not going to get the financial rewards out of this, but you're going to get an opportunity to do things that are so important and so special. And you're going to get an opportunity to serve kids, and you're going to get an opportunity to help kids grow and become better. And that is such an important responsibility, and it's such a great gift of what we get to do. And don't forget those things as you go through this, because education is tough. It's getting pulled in a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, if we focus on that positive part of what we do and why we do it, and we don't forget that, then you're going to experience success, and you're going to experience happiness and joy out of the job. And so it's such an important job, and you do get rewards out of it. And so that's the thing I would say they to them. I think the thing about superintendents, I tell people the same. I give the same pieces of advice is it's a great job. You really get to impact the students in your district at a very large level. I'd say the two things I always try and keep in mind, and both of these things were told to me from other superintendents, is don't ever forget that one of your jobs is you're there to advocate for those kids that don't have anybody speaking for them. And so make sure you continue to do those kinds of things. The second thing I always say is, and I always tell our board and our administrators this, is what our job is to not deliver the school district that I think they need to have. So I tell people, look, Angleton ISD does not get the school district that Phil Edwards thinks it needs to have. the people in the community and the school board of Angleton ISD get to tell me what kind of school district they want, and my job is to deliver that to them.
Mhm.
And so that's our job, is to deliver the types of districts that our communities want. I think that's very important to remember. School districts are very different all throughout the state, and they have different needs and things. And I think as a superintendent, you cannot lose sight of that. You have to be responsive to the community. I think that's very, very important.
That's, I mean, as board president and as someone who's I'm on the TASB board also, and I see the differences across the state. That's very powerful. Thank you for that. Our listeners are going to love that, and they're going to be encouraged by that, sir.
I appreciate that. But like I said, I think that's very important as a superintendent. You have to understand that you're serving the community.
Mm.
Yeah, this has been a refreshing discussion, and the reason why is I don't know why it reminds me of this, but it reminds me of Stephen Covey's book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mhm.
And it's kind of it seems like, anyways, to me, one opinion here, that it's a back to the basics type of discussion.
Mhm.
Give the kids what they need, first of all, the food, their well-being, the support. Reward them with their efforts, give them access to dual credit classes. If they're put in the work and they have achieved
Mhm.
the results, reward them for that. Know your why, know why you're in,
Mhm.
why are you in this role to begin with? What makes you want, and when the times get tough, go back to why you're there in the first place. Then having that mentor, listening to the community. I mean, this is so important. I mean, we could talk about a lot of other things, but these are the things that are the foundation that everything else is built upon. And so that this has been really exciting. And so I want to thank you, Superintendent Edwards, for being on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. I can't wait to meet you in person soon.
Absolutely. I look forward to meeting you. And again, thank you very much for asking me to do this. I enjoy having these kinds of conversations. And so
Well, I think we're going to have you on again. I think we need to have another, I think another deep dive into equity conversation with you would be wonderful.
I would appreciate that. But again, thank you very much. I was very honored that you asked me to do this.
Yeah.
Yes, we're honored to have you as a guest. And before we close out, just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact is a faith-based company that's giving funding to school districts. They've given $1.5 billion to over 160 districts in Texas and over 700 churches. And they do that using technology to generate a source of revenue for school districts. Many districts have used it to increase teacher salaries or whatever the needs of the district are. So if you are looking for additional funding for your district, check out Ideal Impact. And for those that have been tuning in, stay tuned for future episodes of the Educational Leadership Podcast.